if you want an antidote to postmodern information. Okay, but very few things are empirically verifiable, which we can discuss at another time. So the point is that I was getting at, if you're a Big Bang theorist, your account is a metaphysical partial narrative. If you're a rainforest shaman and you think that the waterfall is where the Creator God lives and that's where everything came from, you can't verify that either. If you're a Christian minister, you can't show everybody how Jesus ascended from the tomb after 3 days. It's a metaphysical partial narrative. Now, many people will get angry and say, the scientists will get angry and say, no, the Big Bang is not a postmodern narrative. The Christian will say, no, Jesus rising from the dead is not a postmodern narrative. Now, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's simply the case that nobody has seen these things happen. There is no sense experience for the Big Bang singularity. The cosmic background radiation isn't empirical, direct observational evidence for a Big Bang singularity. It could be for an expansion, but not for a Big Bang singularity. That would take another different kind of evidence. So if you're if you're a rainforest shaman, Christian minister, or Big Bang theorist, you're all basing your work on invisible entities, and you're deriving your narrative as best you can from metaphysical information. So your narrative is partial and will likely be changed in the future as people come up with new narratives which they think are improvements. This is how postmodernism works. It's a very, very mentally earth-shattering theory, but also very beautiful philosophical theory. Notice it's a theory as well. And in the next show, which I have tentatively planned for Monday, we're going to discuss the concept of mystery, which comes out of postmodernism, which is essential to the cannabis philosopher. And there's a lot that you probably wouldn't, we'll discuss it then, but it's a lot of things that have not really been discussed much, or if ever, are going to be hit in that point, at that show. All right, so where's all this leading? Here's the point, and I've got this written on a bookmark that my daughter made me. I just wrote a note here. And here's the point. This is where postmodernism leads us. Beyond this little TV screen, quote-unquote TV screen of a world we experience, I said it because our daily experience seems like a TV screen. Just these images in front of us are just like a changing set of images, almost like a television. That becomes more evident in cannabis consciousness than ego consciousness, but it's evident in both if you just sit back and watch the images float by in your consciousness. It just appears to be like a TV screen. So beyond this little TV screen of a world, of our experience composing our empirical life, beyond that is a bottomless black ocean of mystery and unknowing. See, that's what postmodernism points us to, and that's exactly what cannabis consciousness makes very, very evident. Because, as of course most of you know, in cannabis consciousness, it's a different kind of consciousness. You can't really compare it to your normal waking consciousness, which is the normal waking consciousness is called the ego consciousness, or the egotistical consciousness. And that consciousness is very different than cannabis consciousness. The ego consciousness is filled with lots of desires. It is terrified of boredom and stagnation, and seeks a lot of things. Okay, and it's also kind of a spiteful, vindictive consciousness as well. Cannabis consciousness, all that goes away, and a lot of the opposite factors come into play. One is terrified of doing things rather than boredom. One does not desire things. All they want to do is just sit and do nothing and not want anything. And you naturally think about things in cannabis consciousness. In ego consciousness, thinking is kind of a chore, like, oh, I don't want to do that math problem. Oh, I don't want to read that pamphlet. I don't want to try to figure out how, my recorder is set up with the instructions and so forth. A lot of that analytical, intellectual work feels like drudgery. It kind of hurts to do it. So people don't want to do it. They try to avoid it and go watch TV or something instead. See, in cannabis consciousness, all that's very, very easy. and it actually comes natural. Your mind just automatically starts becoming analytical. You start thinking through things, and you become sort of an expert theoretician. This is such a dramatic difference between ego and cannabis consciousness that it's almost like ego and cannabis consciousnesses are two different sorts of consciousnesses. A lot of times people want to try to compare the two. Oh, I'm more this way in cannabis consciousness than I am when I'm not stoned, or something they'll say. No, it's really, they're different, separated consciousnesses. Your interests and behaviors in cannabis consciousness are different than those in non-stoned consciousness and ego consciousness. But anyway, the point here is that this idea that we don't know all of our theories with certainty, and that the images floating across our screen of consciousness are just, we don't know how real they are. They kind of feel like a TV screen. And then third point, one becomes a sort of natural, intellectual, analytic type of person, where their mind thinks through things at a much more high-powered rate than ego consciousness could even do. If one could even get ego consciousness to not be lazy, be non-lazy enough to pursue such intellectual pursuits. Those three issues lead to the cannabis consciousness being quite different, and leading to great skepticism over, in general, everything about this physical reality we have here on Earth, which is exactly the same thing postmodernism is leading to. In other words, both cannabis consciousness and postmodern philosophy lead to the idea that we don't really know anything except that there's a great mystery of our existence. We don't know where we came from, and we may have just tiny snippets of a picture. Some people might think, but it's just surprising how little information there is on who we are, what we are, where we came from, where we're going after we die. A lot of people may have some partial narratives about, where we go after we die, for example, but as far as there being any empirical information that you can see, something you can point to, there's nothing, So postmodernism and cannabis consciousness both make this all quite evident and lead to this great, now what the bleep do we do? There's nothing to do because we don't know anything. Our actions are futile. Most likely our actions just end up hurting other people. So don't do anything. And just soak up in the mystery, because everything else is a partial narrative, which doesn't give you any real information unless you want to just do it for fun. So that's exactly what postmodernism leads to and what cannabis consciousness leads to. And in professional philosophy, that's what I do. That's my my money-paying job, is I'm a philosopher. I teach. But anyways, in professional philosophy, this has caused a great upheaval. Nobody knows what to do anymore. Either people just reject postmodernism outrightly and say it can't be right, and they move on with their life, inventing the partial narratives and furthering them and studying them, or people sort of wonder, now what the blank do we do? And that's what the next show is going to address. I'm not really sure what the answer is. I've got some ideas, but it's not quite what you think. It's a very spiritual sort of next step. But anyway, that's what has to be addressed. So getting back to the point, this leads to a great mystery of what are humans doing here on planet Earth. If postmodernism and cannabis consciousness report that there's this great mystery, bottomless black ocean of mystery beyond our TV screen empirical imagistic consciousness, then why are we here? I mean, we're just sort of destined to be the creatures that don't know anything. And is that good or is that bad? In cannabis consciousness, it's all one wants, because all one wants to do is sit there and just see colors, think about things analytically with a very clear understanding that they're partial narratives. Sort of in cannabis consciousness, it's sort of easy to understand that what you think, all your little theories you go through in your mind are just a partial view, and one is quite happy with that in cannabis consciousness. But from the ego consciousness perspective, this is absolute terror. To think that humans are, we can define humans as follows. They are the race of speaking, feeling, self-aware bio-machines who have no idea of who they are, what the world is, where they're going, where they came from, what makes up their consciousness, what consciousness even is, what are the building blocks of consciousness, what the building blocks are of the physical world. Like, what's an electron? Fuzzy piece of flickering energy or something. And humans have great susceptibility to spiritual eruptions. Are those real? Are those based on more hallucinations? I mean, we just don't know. And that's absolute terror to the ego mind. The ego mind wants to think it knows, it's brilliant, it can figure things out, and that will help them move forward in life. And of course, history and the contemporary world show that that's not true. That leads to addiction, war, television-generated consciousness, making up religions that are not in a very good state, and so forth. So then, on the other hand, the cannabis consciousness, it is completely at home and happy with the idea that this postmodern reality is the case. Nothing could be more enjoyable because there's nothing to do anyways except sit and feel. So, the postmodern response is the perfect response. Maybe this is why ego dwellers, partly why they scorn cannabis users, because how can anybody be so useless to just sit there when there's so much to do? There's so many partial narratives to fiddle around with. Anyway, I think we're running long on this, so this is the end of this recording. Let's go back to the live show here.
Yeah, that was a recording I did earlier today. That's it for the show today, everybody. Tune in Monday for a show on cannabis and cosmic mystery. It'll be very profound information. Okay, youtube.com/Kush Philosopher. Take care.